All right, so we're going to talk about breaking trust. So breaking trust is an important aspect of network communications. A lot of times we're having communications with people in person. We're trusting who they are, right? When you walk into a doctor's office, you trust that you are talking to an actual doctor, that they have passed their board exams, that they have their medical license, and that they're going to behave in a particular way. Now, that doesn't always work out, but for the most part, when you're in person, it does. Now, online, that's not necessarily true. We have that problem of authenticity, right? How do we know someone is who they say they are and is being authentic and being truthful and trustworthy in what they're saying? Now, this often comes through in a variety of ways, and we're going to talk about a few of those. So, we're going to talk about, let's start with identity theft. So, this is a big concern, particularly in our more and more interconnected lives as we complete more and more forms online and digitally. Our information, whether it's our social security number, our credit card, our name, our birth date, our mother's maiden name, right? All of these things uh, can cause a data leak, right? When a cyber hack happens, what happens to our data? Is it accessible? Who has it? Who has our email addresses? Who has our social? What are people doing with that data? Is it stored in an encrypted way? But identity theft isn't just about cyber hacks and those kind of things. You also have other ways in which people try to get your information, such as shoulder surfing, which is where somebody is just kind of watching you fill out a form, which can still happen in a digital environment, right? Someone can watch you fill out a form on a computer, but it can also happen in person. And there's a variety of other ways in which identity theft can happen, including things such as phishing, right? Phishing is an important aspect of this identity theft where they try to get your information. And it doesn't have to just be phishing in the sense of trying to get information personal that's about you, but it could also be about getting your password so they can get into your account and either buy something in their name or do something else with your account that you're not generally going to appreciate or like. So the next thing we're going to talk about here is fake reviews. This is becoming more and more problematic on sites such as Amazon, where it's hard to evaluate the authenticity of a review. Did the person actually buy it? Were they paid to promote it, right? These are questions that we have when we're talking about fake reviews on sites like Amazon. Are people being honest with what they actually purchased? Are the reviews authentic? And how can we ensure that we're getting the most honest information as a consumer? It's really hard right now to trust what you're finding in terms of reviews on the web, even from longer form review sites that are like blogs or other such information. It's becoming more and more common to be paid to do that kind of work. So it's really easy to break trust with the consumer and the company when you can't verify that the product that you're buying is actually worth your money. Another aspect is catfishing. So people straight up saying that they are somebody who they aren't. This is most often referred to in terms of dating sites, right? Somebody presenting themselves as a particular way in a dating app such as Tinder, and then they show up in person and they look entirely different. But catfishing can also take place in other forms when more professional contexts where somebody pretends to be somebody else. They act like they are somebody who has authority, who is an official of some capacity, whether it's a doctor or a lawyer or a political figure, um, and they're not, right? So this is something that happens a lot on the internet. I'm sure that many of you have experienced or witnessed some kind of event happening where this was occurring, where people either pretended to be somebody else on purpose and with, you know, trying to convince people, trying to manipulate people into doing something, um, or you witness it as somebody's making a joke and somebody doesn't quite get that it's a joke or and they're taking it a little too seriously. Now the next is false information. So false information is a big problem because is really easy for information to spread online, right? We're seeing this more and more, particularly in our current political context, that false information spreads really easily, particularly on social media sites. Uh, if we look at the previous election cycle, we know that we can identify quite a bit of manipulation in what people were seeing based off of either fake information and deliberately false information, or just somebody repeating something they heard. This isn't just true for politics, but this also happens in an anti-vax community or a flat earth community, where we know that these people are getting truly false information and believing it. And this can be problematic, particularly let's take a look at the anti-vax community, where people are saying not to get vaccines because of microchips and needles or some other ridiculous claim that just doesn't hold any water. And these kind of misinformations can spread really quickly online, and it's really hard to curb and control. It also makes it harder to trust the people that you're working with or who are talking to you. Let's also talk about cyberbullying. So I mentioned this before, that cyberbullying isn't just about teenagers, talking bad about each other on the internet. There's a lot more to it than that. Cyberbullying is actually a very real problem for a lot of youth, but is also a problem for a lot of adults as well. It doesn't just cover things such as those teenagers in high school, but it also covers things such as harassment on sites like Twitter, right? How do we control what people are saying and talking about when there's so much more going on than just, it's really hard to tell when someone's being sarcastic and being honest and authentic online. So it's hard to hold these people accountable for what they say, and it's really easy to backtrack if you're ever accused of something. So cyberbullying is just one of those things where it's like, oh, it was a joke, and the person who was impacted, the victim, clearly knows it wasn't a joke. It wasn't a joke to them. It really hurt them. But there's not a whole lot of accountability for the perpetrator of these kinds of acts. So this really breaks the user's trust with different platforms. Twitter has come under all kinds of scrutiny lately because of the increased harassment people are seeing on there. This also comes under the form of doxing. So doxing is when people try to get your real information because of something you said online. And this is becoming a real problem for people who are in positions of power, such as people in politics, but also for people in industries and companies where they maybe have a statement that they said in regards to some issue that's happening in a public area, and then they're getting private, unsolicited direct messages. They're getting hate mail sent to their homes. They're getting death threats. This happens a lot, and it does fall under this cybersecurity category. And the last area that I'm going to mention is revenge porn. So revenge porn is something that happens. So let's say that someone took a nude picture of themselves and sent it to their significant other. Now, whether or not you think that in itself is ethically right or wrong, revenge porn is when somebody takes that image that they were sent privately and with intent for one particular person and decides to put it online as a way to get revenge after a breakup or some other event occurs in their life. Now, this is getting more and more problematic because revenge porn doesn't have to be an actual image sent anymore. And we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to one of the other ethics prompts later in the semester, but this also can happen with deepfakes and AI. So a deepfake is when we can basically superimpose somebody's face onto this other image, and we can animate it in a realistic fashion to the point of which it's undistinguishable from the real thing. And more people are using deepfakes to create porn and create revenge porn in particular. And it's really hard to, as someone who maybe be a victim of such a thing, to dispute that that's something that they didn't do. And it's also really hard to persecute anybody for using this kind of image. Now, with traditional revenge porn, you can absolutely persecute somebody for that kind of harassment. It's very hard, but it's much easier than doing something with a deep fake. So next, I want to talk to you a little bit about discussion questions that you should be asking yourself and asking your group. So I'm going to do that in the next video, as well as some potential things to be considering, some of the the case studies from the book. Now, on the next set of videos that I release on Wednesday, those are going to be a little bit more of those case studies in analyzing particular issues within this topic area, within this chapter. But I want to bring up some discussion questions you should be thinking about that we're not going to be covering.